10 straight wins for Max Verstappen, 15 straight for Red Bull Racing. The perfect season is dead. Long live King Carlos. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 473 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. And I can't believe I get to say this. We had a fucking great Formula One race this weekend. Genuinely the race of the year. It was good. It was genuinely really good.
Dre, are you sure you're not just saying that because somebody not driving a Red Bull won?
It definitely helps. It definitely helps. I'm not going to lie about that one. Look, I'm here for intrigue, and you cannot sit there and tell me that 4 different cars from 3 different teams on 2 different strategies by the end of that race wasn't captivating. If you didn't find that enjoyable, then F1 is not the sport for you, quite frankly. Because, Carlos Sainz has won a Grand Prix. Again, only the second time in his career. Ferrari has won a race, which, God, 4 months ago, you would have laughed out of the room if you thought Ferrari was winning a race this year.
Apparently, some people were shocked to know that this is Carlos Sainz. This is not Carlos Sainz's first win. Who knew?
Did people forget about Silverstone last year that quickly?
All anyone could remember was Lewis Hamilton going through from that race.
Wasn't even the best overtake on that sequence of 2 laps, but it's amazing what a good David Croft commentary call does for a motherfucker. But yes, this is the Singapore Grand Prix review. This was an incredibly captivating race. Singapore does have a knack of throwing a cat amongst the pigeons, and it certainly did on this occasion. Red Bull was human. Not only did they not win, not only did they not even get on the podium, they barely could finish in the top 5, and they ended a very unique streak, which we'll get to very shortly as well. But first up, we'll go around the horn for this excited panel of experts. First up, Cam Buckley. Hello, Cam.
Howdy, everyone. My bet would have been wrong. And that's okay, because I'm still way closer than either of my colleagues are. By a mile.
I think I was in the middle of the road when we made our prediction of how many races Red Bull. To be fair, I think I said 17, and I think you said 18. So
I said all, and then I got talked down to, 18.
We tried to tell you through 70 years of history, this doesn't happen!
And yet, it didn't happen in a way that anyone would have expected.
No. Look, for once, Cam, you can't say we weren't wrong to talk you off the fence on this one, all right? But technically speaking, we were right. Going for the perfect season was a mistake. A small one, but it counts. So we're taking that.
Oh, it's only down to it can still be the greatest Formula One season of all time if they
easily
just don't win. if they just win every remaining race, which again, Singapore can be that outlier. Ask Mercedes from 2015.
Yeah, it has been the historical, I'd argue, biggest outlier of the last decade when it comes to Formula One in general and general form books. We'll get into some of that a little bit later on, but also with me, of course, is RJ O'Connell. Hello, RJ.
Hi, I'm glad we could join us all in a very Red Bull-centric episode as we were going to talk about, because Red Bull has big resource management problems, and not all that's to do with their big...
Not just their front tire usage.
Yeah. Well, not just that. Not just some old guy who runs most of the team. They got 3 drivers going into 2 seats, and I don't know what to make of it.
It is, as my girlfriend would say, a messy bitch. We're going to be talking a little bit about that Liam Lawson situation, because Lawson continued to ball with his best weekend yet in the AlphaTauri, making Q3, and AlphaTauri's best result of the year so far this season, the 9th place finish, firmly in the points. And oh boy, this is going to be a selection headache if you're Red Bull Racing, but we'll get into that later on as well. And Dr. Helmut Marko's being an old fuck again. And that's about as nice as I'll be on the situation. Because something happened in between Monza and Singapore, which definitely warrants further discussion. And it is ungood in how we have to talk about it. But we have to talk about it. So, yeah, we'll be doing that towards the end of the show. In the meantime, here's the places you can find us real quick. We are on facebook.com/motorsport101. We're on Twitter at motorsport_101 until Elon decides to charge us for that too. The prick. If you want to, until then, you can follow our personal handles at Dre_WTF1, at CBuckley917, and at RJ O'Connell. Our website, Motorsport101, is where all of our bonus edition blogs are there, as well as also all our podcast episodes too. If you're a big IndyCar fan, I've written a lot of words on the 2023 IndyCar season. Parts 1 and 2 are up. By the time this goes out, part 3 will also be up as well. I actually did a word count on it last night. The whole thing came to 10,200. It was a universe.
You wrote like a whole Athlon sports guide.
It is a university dissertation here in the UK, because a dissertation in the UK is 10,000 words. I did 10,200 something. It was. I do not know how the last part came out at over 5,000. I just wrote and it just came out. I do not understand how this happened. Here we are. So all 3 parts of that will be up on the website by the time this episode goes out, and some bonus thoughts on Singapore on the website's blog section as well. Do check that out if you haven't already. We're on Instagram at Motorsport101 Paul, and if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon. Patreon.com/Motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of these new episodes as they are the day before, I should say, they're being released. You can upgrade to the $10 level to get access to our record room where you can listen to these episodes live as they're being done. Jason's doing so right now, thanks to Jason, who pointed out that when it came to our official list on bets, apparently RJ said 16, I said 17, and Cam said 18. So yeah, Cam's still way out in front. Hopefully, hopefully Price is Right rules will come into effect when McLaren win the last 4 rounds of the year.
You are not just on crack. You are the drug problem.
One could only hope. Also, shut up, we got a brand new Patreon backer as well. Ciara Molly has backed us as well at the €10 level. Thank you so much. That's incredibly generous of you. Do get in touch.
I need the Discord soundboard in this Riverside chat.
I need the air horn. Yes.
Don't you worry. We'll only keep like early access and stuff behind paywall. We're not going to paywall everything like that jackass Elon.
No, definitely not. But thank you so much for backing us. It's incredibly kind of you. Reach out to me somewhere on the internet, and we'll hook you up with all the extra stuff like our Discord server and things like that. So please get in touch if you're listening, Ciara. Much appreciated. Thank you so much for backing us, and you can too if you do so at Patreon.com/Motorsport101. But without further ado, let's get into the Singapore Grand Prix. Did we mention the Red Bull didn't win this race yet? After 15 consecutive wins, Red Bull has been defeated for the first time this season. They can only manage 5th and 8th in Singapore after setup concerns had both cars eliminated in Q2 for the first time in 102 Grand Prix weekends. The only person who's ever had a longer Q3 qualifying streak than that was Valtteri Bottas, 103. God bless him.
10 out of 10, baby. No notes.
10 out of 10. Exactly. At the front, Carlos Sainz held off Lando Norris, who worked together with slowing down the pace of the race to hold off the 2-stopping Mercedes at the end, with George Russell costing himself a podium after hitting the wall on the outside of turn 10 on the final lap, with Lewis Hamilton inheriting 3rd place. Was that the race of the year so far?
Go back and watch the 30-minute cadets version of the race. I had a busy weekend and couldn't watch this live, but I saw, very good stuff. And not just because of the fact that, Red Bull's not in contention for the win. This was genuinely a great, great tactical race with a fantastic 4-way finish at the end. Well, at the very, very end, it was 3, but for most of it, it was 4.
At the very, very end. I would say it was I'm split on this. The first half of the race, thanks to an early safety car, was basically the nothingest of burgers. And then, thank God for French powertrains. Because Esteban Ocon, bless his heart, he tried. Gets a box full of neutrals, stops on track, gets the VSC, and Mercedes throws the dice to try and run everyone in front of them down. They were the only team with extra mediums, and they went for it.
It's crazy because, Singapore is a place where you would hardly ever consider giving up track position.
No.
Under any circumstances.
Kinda. One of the things this year is that actually they were running a different track layout. The previous one is coming back next year, but
Yeah.
But fucking why? This one's better.
Agreed.
in what way?
We actually had some proper overtakes down that back end of the track this time as opposed to last year. Do you want to see cars? Yes.
We had who, besides the Red Bulls who were on dead tires, who passed anyone this race?
It's still better than what we would have had previously. Like let it cook. Do you really want to add 4 more chicanes for no good reason?
Yeah, because it was an overtaking opportunity last year.
Was it really?
It's never been an overtaking opportunity.
Well, it wasn't under the previous generation of cars where, God, you had like a 3.5 second dirty air zone back in like 2019.
And you want that back, yeah?
Because last year it wasn't.
And it will be when, again, cars keep discovering more downforce and loopholes around the regulations. You know how this story goes, Cam.
Yeah.
Buddy, you all knew.
We had 2 cars run up to the front 2, and they had nearly 2 seconds in hand and couldn't pass shit.
Because the straights of Singapore are not long enough. That's inherently the problem.
So you just counteracted your own point.
Look, and you think the solve of that is by sticking 2 more chicane sets in the final sector of the track.
It was a better layout last year.
Nonsense. I refuse to agree with you on this one. That is nonsense.
Why are you booing me? I'm right.
No, you're not.
Part of the problem with a lot of modern circuits is that they are way too complex anyway. Like bruh.
Because I know what this
Barcelona was never improved by sticking a second clumsy-ass chicane in that final sector.
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. But there was unfortunately good reason for that chicane. But yeah. Anyway,
let's talk about this lead fight, because Carlos Sainz drove his best race as a Formula One driver. If you had thought that the Silverstone win should never have happened, buddy, he drove a perfect race from start to finish. He was clever about it too.
Yeah, that's what you're meant to do. That's what you're meant to do. And yeah, like this is a race that you don't drive at full speed. Like, not even compared to the average race trim situation. They were deliberately backing the wagon up because everybody knew that the hard was not going to be a feasible tyre. Anytime to mitigate that is a plus. The hard tyre was a donkey in this race. And everybody worth a damn besides the Red Bull started on the mediums. So we knew how this was going to end. And yeah, like, it was intriguing. Like, Carlos Sainz dictated the pace of that race perfectly. He was fantastic. You can't take anything away from him. Qualified on pole, did what he had to do. And I love the fact that he didn't even need the team to tell him to back the wagon up with Lando Norris at the end of that race and play off each other's. Because the Ferrari is strong enough in a straight line with its straight power that, you know, it can't be overtaken, even with McLaren having DRS, because the Mercedes power unit is not fast enough in a straight line to pass.
Well, it's more the McLaren is just even with, and they brought basically another massive revision to the car to the point where it's practically a C-spec car at this point.
Right.
But it's still just pants in a straight line. It makes its time everywhere else.
Yeah, Norris said himself, like, it's a faster car, but it's still the same problems he's always had all year, basically, is what he said after the race.
I also love when George Russell was on the radio saying that Sainz was driving too slow in front of him on the VSC, because, like, I think I knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to back the wagon up to make sure that Mercedes, if they were to go switch tires under the virtual safety car, it wasn't going to be viable and they'd lose too much position.
They knew exactly what they were doing, and like this was a thinking man's race, and Carlos Sainz is one of the best thinking man drivers in Formula One. He always has been. How many times have we joked that Carlos Sainz knows better than his own strategy department does on the radio? Like, to
be fair, when that strategy department is Ferrari, that bar is usually resting somewhere in the Earth's inner core.
It's still an improvement.
He's merely replaced Sebastian Vettel as head strategist.
Whatever counts, right? Whatever counts. But look, props to Mercedes for at least for once taking the aggressive option. Like, they're a lot more fun when Mercedes are hunting people down rather than trying to play it as safe as they possibly can, like they normally do. Like that was fun. It was very fun, and I'm glad that it happened because we got a fantastic result to it would have been a great tactical race anyway, but we would have lacked the crescendo of a big finish, and we actually got a big finish as a direct result of this. And
sorry, Esteban Ocon, you are the sacrificial lamb.
Yes, happy birthday, Esteban. Have a retirement from what would have been a top 6 finish.
God, that fucking... How is that car that unreliable in the year of our Lord 2023?
I don't know. Like it was a gearbox this time, apparently, according to Esteban himself. But
box full of neutrals.
Man celebrated his 27th birthday with a gearbox failure. Happy birthday, Esteban. At least his teammate Pierre Gasly got a top 6 finish instead by finishing P6 on the day, which was good for him. The ever erratic nature of Alpine coming into play once again.
Man, I knew it was a wild finish when I saw F1 manager memes about George Russell going on the final lap.
Well, let's get into that because, well, the Mercs caught, but then as a result of this ass layout, we'll not get off of that, they couldn't do shit with all their pace. They were 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds a lap faster, and they could do nothing with it.
Well,
he follows Lando into turn 10. Lando clips the wall with his right rear. George Russell clips it a little harder, breaks his wheel. He went for the gap.
And missed.
Went flying off into the wall, and that was day done.
George was almost in tears by the time he got back to he was in tears when
he put on sunglasses.
Yeah, he was in tears by the time he got back to the paddock. He was absolutely distraught at that one. And it kind of sums up Russell's year. Like, the speed is still there. On a good day, he can Let's not forget.
It's been back since the summer break. He has been back to his best from last year.
He out-qualified Hamilton by 0.5 seconds this weekend. Russell smoked Hamilton over a lap this time around. But again, he's made another mistake in a race situation, which is just unfortunate. He wasn't doing this last year. This year, he's had 2 or 3 of these occasions where he's completely ruined himself off his own making. I don't think there's any massive cause for concern with that, because a lot of people are very quick to jump on is Russell cooked campaign, and no, calm down.
It was a desperation heave, because really, the only place he could actually really use the tire was out of traction zones, basically opening up the corner and trying to get enough traction down that you could fire it up the inside of one of the next chicanes.
Right.
Because the straights are just too short here. And that's how we got past a couple of cars, how we got past Charles on the charge on the fresher tires.
Well, to be fair, Charles was also nursing an overheated engine by that point in the race.
Yeah, Charles' race fell apart really from the first safety car onwards.
I cannot believe... What is this? Charles Leclerc played the team game for Ferrari, and there was no, hemming and hawing about it.
He's a good boy, Charles, at his core, and I don't know why they put him on soft tyres either at the start of that race. That was a death pact.
There was one tyre worth a damn. The medium did everything. The hard died quicker than the medium and was far slower, and the softs just died instantly.
Yeah. The softs were cooked in 15 laps. The mediums are good for 25 to... Well, I think summed it up better for me was when they told Charles Leclerc around lap 12, target free, which at this point I think Charles has only just realised, no, my friend, you're the cork in the bottle on this occasion. And basically said, could you do us a favour, Charles, and just back the wagon up for us? And then 3 laps later, you get the message of, target 5, and I'm like, what do you mean target 5? I'm just Ferrari, never change. I don't know what they were doing putting Charles. It's like they were almost saying, okay, Charles, look, if you pass Sainz on the opening lap on the soft tyres with the extra grip you'll get off the start, great. If not, you're kind of fucked. Good luck, basically.
Too much.
Ferrari strategy department, it giveth and it taketh away.
It won them the race at the cost of everything else. Ferrari didn't go winless on the year to have 4 out of 5 winless years in the last couple of years.
They won a race, but at what cost? We sacrificed Charles to the incinerator, literally, in this case, because of how hot his engine got by the end of that race. And yeah, Red Bull, people have asked, like, is this a TD18 problem? No. Calm down.
Yeah, even if it was, like, I need to see more data.
Well, the thing is, in a weird alternate universe, Red Bull still bullshitted this from 11th.
Probably.
Because Max was sitting on the hards, basically running the same pace as everyone else because the car was the quickest one in race trim on simulations. It just, they qualified so far down, it gave them too much work to do.
Yeah.
You couldn't really pass here. Max tried a couple of times once he got up behind, I want to say Ocon. It was behind one of the Alpines.
It was Ocon, yeah.
But the safety car for Logan Sargent's broken front wing fell at the exact wrong time.
Yeah.
And Red Bull played the game wrong where they should have just come in and bolted on mediums, and they probably slice up the pack because we didn't know how much better the hards were or how much better the mediums were going to be than the hards.
Yeah,
they brought them back out. They were on the old hards to restart the race, and they just sank. Once the hards cooled off, they died on the vine.
Because Verstappen was second after that safety car chicane, and he was very quickly overtaken by all the leading group.
Anyone who stayed out on hards just died.
It was so crazy listening to Alex Jake's call the restart of the race. Max Verstappen is going to be so aggressive, and Carlos Sainz has already gapped him by a second.
Yeah. Anyone who stayed out on their first stint tires just fell like a stone. And then Red Bull did come in for mediums, started carving their way back through the field, and then the VSC they would have needed to make it work falls about 4 or 5 laps later.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just how it goes.
They stretched that hard stint as long as they could, begging for a safety car to drop, and it came too late.
Sergio Perez with the widest Red Bull on the planet to hold off Alonso, who, by the way, was driving around with damage to the lower left wishbone on the front of his car, which wouldn't have actually been mechanical damage, but would have been wreaking all kinds of havoc on his aero.
Yeah, and it was still on track to at least salvage points out of it until the jack broke in the pits, and instead of like a 3 to a 4 second pit stop, it turns into 26 seconds.
That would have been right at home in this weekend's IMSA race.
Oh, God almighty.
As a side note, Porsche dropping 963 Service Pack 2 has done wonders.
You know.
If you know, you know.
Yeah, Mr. Porsche, man. You can't see it because this is not a visual medium, but Cam is smug. The phrase I think the UK we use is grinning like a Cheshire cat.
Yes. But
one manufacturer let him down this weekend. The other one's got to pick up the slack.
Yeah.
Well, and again, at the end, it's weird because we thought Red Bull was going to have, just some divine intervention bullshit strike down their evil. Well, actually, they just missed the setup.
Yeah, it was simple as that. I had a chat with Mark Hughes about this over at the race, and he summed it up. I had my own suspicion about it, and he pretty much backed up what I was saying when he wrote about it, where he basically said, yeah, Red Bull, they can get away with running their car lower to the ground than anybody else can. You can't do that in Singapore because it's an incredibly bumpy track. It's like F1's version of Sebring. They can't run their car as low, so they had to sacrifice some of their beloved downforce to, their consistent, not very peaky downforce that makes their car so good by raising the floor to compensate for that. And once they did that, they were boned, basically, because it completely upset the balance of their car. And as the track
wild thing is, right? Had they left the setup alone after FP3, they probably would have been all right. But they tried, they threw a bunch of stuff at it for qualifying, and it looked okay in Q1. We quickly found out in Q2 that it was not, in fact, fine.
No, they made it slidey as hell.
Yeah, well, in the first half of the lap, the second half of the lap, they were okay. First half of the lap, the front of the car was not in the track. It was very reminiscent of Mercedes here in 2015, where every setup they threw at the W06 in 2015, they just couldn't get the rear tires to bite.
Yeah, and Red Bull's had those problems all year long. It's the only real weakness of their car is that over a lap they struggle to get heat into their tyres in the first half of a qualifying lap.
Yeah,
so
the same characteristic that makes them so mighty in race trim, cripples them over a lap. And again, had Max kind of blew his lap first corner, or it was turn 3, he just missed the corner, and Perez. We'll get to him later. Holy shit, he was terrible this weekend. He was terrible, and multiple other drivers got to experience just how terrible he drove.
Yeah, more on that shortly.
Trey, I've got a question.
Fire away.
Surely this is going to be a sign of things to come for Red Bull, because where are we heading next?
Oh, Japan.
Yeah, that's traditionally like a bumpy circuit, Suzuka, right?
Smoother than a baby's bottom.
It's all medium speed, high speed, and straights. It's power unit dependent. They won by a lot here last year in a short race.
Bro, this Honda, at Honda owns Suzuka circuit, it's going to hit like crap.
Oh yeah,
which is funny because my crack works at Aston Martin.
Finally, GP1 engine.
Yes, GP1 engine, and yes, most likely Red Bull win the Constructors' Championship this next weekend at Japan.
George Russell's crash actually gave Red Bull a much easier win condition in Suzuka than they otherwise should have had.
Yeah,
there's a pretty good chance they wrap it up.
I think they've got to outscore Mercedes by 1 and not lose more than 24, I think, to Ferrari or something silly like that.
What was it? Ferrari have actually taken second in the constructors.
Not quite. They're still 23 behind.
Are they 23? Oh, I'm thinking of a different thing.
Yeah. But Ferrari have now clearly ahead of Aston Martin and now for third, and they're actually
Aston have completely capitulated. There is one driver we haven't mentioned. Lance Stroll done goofed in qualifying. And as a result, completely wrote off his car and was not present this weekend.
Yeah, they pulled him from the weekend after that. He was very sore after the crash, apparently. A lot of muscle pain. Decided not to risk him and decided to make sure he's 100% for Japan this weekend. Completely wrote off the car. Basically, Q1, final corner, went wide. Car bottomed out on the aero, going over the curb, and at that point you're a passenger.
I think there was maybe one good corner left on that car, and completely destroyed it.
It was fucking wrecked. It was a nasty crash. Thankfully, we're glad he's all okay. Obviously, first and foremost, because it was a nasty one to watch in real time. Thankfully he's all right, but. It wrote off an whole car for the weekend, which is not ideal. We lost about 20 minutes to fix the barrier on the outside wall as well.
I mean, Dre, you would have looked at Aston Martin earlier this year and thought you would have circled Singapore as a race they could have potentially won at.
Yeah.
Instead, they walk away from here with no points, and I think the dream of just hanging on a little bit longer against certainly not Mercedes, but maybe Ferrari and the constructors, that's over at this point. They've got a healthy cushion behind. Yeah, they are not catching those.
They're likely going to end up fourth. I think McLaren's given themselves too much work to do, and I think that podium they got in Zandvoort with Alonso was priceless to get an extra 18 points, given that McLaren struggled that day.
Because Piastri was nowhere this weekend.
Well, he came back to finish 7th from 17th on the grid. It was a good comeback for Piastri
in the old spec car too.
Yeah,
but probably had he qualified higher up, there's a good chance that Piastri's in that lead fight.
Yes. He was very unlucky. He was on a hot lap when Stroll put it in the wall, and he was in the drop zone at the time. And obviously, with the red flag, the session wasn't restarted because the clock was already at 0. So it was just unlucky more than anything else on that one. And Piastri did come back and gain 10 places to finish 7th from 17th on the grid, which is a good day's work for Piastri, no question. It's just Singapore's one of the worst tracks on the calendar for that to happen to you two. Again, we wish Stroll the best. But dear Mike Crack, could you do me a favour, mate? If there is one thing about Lance Stroll that doesn't need questioning, is his commitment. Like, you shouldn't be using a weekend-ending crash and a catastrophic incident for Stroll to talk about how committed he is to Formula One. That seems like a you problem. Doesn't seem necessary to me to use that as a way of talking about how, like Lance Stroll drove a F1 race this year with 2 broken wrists. I don't know where this narrative came from that Stroll doesn't want to drive an F1 car.
It's because he's the owner's son. And he's set for life, and that's the perception, is that he doesn't have to apply himself ever.
We could be critical of Lance Stroll without being idiotic about it. Like
we'll get to more of that in a second. We'll get to more of that later.
Very much so. But like we could be very critical of Lance Stroll for obvious reasons. We don't need to make up narratives about his commitment to this sport in order to get there. He drove a Grand Prix this year and was universally praised in Bahrain this year for driving on 2 broken wrists. And I wouldn't have said he should have done that, but he did, and he drove well. The commitment
that was his best race of the year.
Yeah, the commitment of Lance Stroll is not the problem here. Like, that's all I'll say on that matter. Also, one more thing. Dear stewards, can we please stop giving reprimands out for impeding in qualifying, please? This is getting a bit stupid now, for my liking. We've had 5 reprimands given out for impeding in the last 3 race weekends now in qualifying. Since when, right, did we just decide that the grid drop didn't matter anymore?
At least they're being consistently poor.
You can't have a high-profile incident like Leclerc and Norris at Monaco, where you openly say in the steward's report Leclerc could have done no more, given the fact he was not told Norris was coming, and then use that same excuse in Singapore with Max Verstappen and Logan Sargent and only give out reprimands. It's stupid.
Especially when now in the future, everyone can just say, "Oh, well, there was no communication, therefore they didn't know."
Yeah. You can just say, "Oh, we didn't tell them," and that means, well, does that mean we're not going to get a penalty anymore? It's bollocks. You've now put yourself in a hot mess. I don't want to endorse these conspiracy nut huggers on social media about you being in the Red Bull being in the FIA's pocket or they've bought them out. I'm not saying that that's justified, because that is bullshit too. However, you are not helping your reputation by only giving out reprimands for impeding. Stop being dumber than a box of frogs. Right. Should we move on?
I want to talk about my favorite team, historically my favorite team. They're still in the same base. They're called AlphaTauri now. They're going to be called something else next year, but they have a genuine headache on their hands in regards to hiring drivers for 2024. As reported by Toby Groiner, Yuki Tsunoda is set to stay with the team, but Liam Lawson backed up his strong rookie showing with another outstanding weekend. He made Q3 for the first time, and he finished 9th and got AlphaTauri's best result of the year. But Daniel Ricciardo's still in the mix. Broken hand and all, it looks like he might get the other seat, even though Daniel Ricciardo's health is still up in the air. Red Bull is not 2 teams, it is 1 team. It has 4 seats. Gentlemen, what should they do with its 4 seats? Because I think I've got an idea, but I want to hear what y'all have to say first.
Just say I need to give Yuki Tsunoda a box of chocolates, a hug.
Why can't he finish a lap?
Ride, a tub of cotton candy. Why? Why does the universe hate this man?
He's not finished a racing lap of a Grand Prix since Zandvoort.
A race where he got fucked.
Yeah, he got caught in a clash with Sergio Perez on the opening lap. It was probably a racing incident. Looking back on the footage of it, no, I don't think either party was wholly to blame for that one. I think Tsunoda was a bit blind to Perez on the inside. I think Perez. It's hard to blame Perez for that one. There's a more egregious Perez incident we'll get to later on.
Forget that. I'm blaming Perez for both.
Right, and look.
I'm just blaming him for the later one more.
It punctured Yuki's car, but also it punched a huge fucking hole out of the side of his car, which ended Tsunoda's day on the opening lap, which was dreadfully unfortunate. He's had if he didn't have any luck, if he had bad luck, he'd have no luck at all since the summer break. He's had just horrendous bad luck, and
he was up to make Q3 out of Q2, and then he spun in the final sector.
Yeah, just locked his think it was his left front wheel just went flying off.
Yeah. And
Which, God.
but it looks like he's going to keep his job, which I guess is good.
For me, it's ludicrous that it was ever in question because, I mean, he summarily ended Nick de Vries's F1 career.
But here's the thing, right? Sorry to cut you, Cam, for 1 second there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, all these people that are saying that it doesn't count because it's Nick de Vries, that's not Tsunoda's fault, is it? Like, Tsunoda can only be who gets put in front of him. Like, wait, what? Like, I get it. He was not great the first 2 years of his F1 career when Pierre Gasly was his teammate. No one reasonable is arguing that.
Pierre Gasly is a good driver. Pierre Gasly is a Formula One Grand Prix winner.
Well, what I was going to say to that is that last year we also had this. We had a couple of times where Yuki should have scored big points and shit went wrong. The biggest example I'd say being Baku, where his rear wing can opened itself when it opened DRS.
Yeah,
he's running like what, sixth?
Yeah, was running top 6 at that point. It's
impressed with the improvements that Yuki has made, like independent of who you put in the other seat next to him. And, you know, if we want to go on about how, yeah, Yuki's just putting up good head-to-head numbers against a weak teammate in a bad car, well, then we have to go back and say that about George Russell's years at Williams and Jules Bianchi's year and a half at Marussia and Fernando Alonso's year at Minardi. At some point, you just got to realize, like, here's someone who's driving a bad car to the best of his abilities. Sometimes he's not getting the results he wants out of it, but he's doing what he can.
And what do we say to that when, like, in the 2 races he was against Daniel Ricciardo out-qualified him for 1, and then Yuki out-qualified him the next race?
Arguably Yuki's best race of the year was because that was the Belgian Grand Prix where he scored a point and he was running as high as 6th at one point. Like that was an excellent race for Tsunoda. The sample size is just too small to make sweeping conclusions about Tsunoda by comparison to Lawson and to Ricciardo because the results have been so erratic.
I'll say this about Lawson. He's that good.
He is that good. He's better than advertised. Like, again, like the people that know Liam Lawson is like he's been even better than I thought he was going to be. I knew he was going to be good. I didn't know he was going to be this good, and he's forced himself into the conversation via sheer brute force and excellent performances.
I love Super Formula alum Liam Lawson.
I watch Super Formula.
I love Super Formula graduate Liam Lawson way more than I do DTM graduate Liam Lawson.
Right.
Where's that bar?
Nationalized DTM. No, like, it's crazy because, like, I get why Red Bull wants to keep Daniel Ricciardo in the picture because he's a very marketable driver and a multi-time Grand Prix winner. I just think that Formula One teams need to trust their youngins to lead a team.
What's Daniel Ricciardo going to say as far as car development that's going to fix the AlphaTauri when the last 2 years they've been firing engineers because their numbers in the wind tunnel just don't match what real life shows?
They're straight up going to start. They straight up say they're going to start like cribbing ideas off the Red Bull to help turn this around.
And it was insane that they didn't do that in the first place. When the Red Bull until just this weekend was on the hottest streak of all time.
You know why they
out of the last 25.
You know why they didn't want to do that is because back in the days when Toro Rosso had cars that looked a lot like last year's Red Bull, everybody was saying, that's not right.
Really? Let me call up Gene Haas and get his opinion on the matter.
Right.
Because let me ask Aston Martin about what their 2020 car looked like when it was still pink.
It's like in the UK because the inflation's so high, we no longer judge people for living with their mums. Like in the same way that like it's okay for F1 teams to buy whatever the hell they can off the shelf. It's fine. Do it.
Haas popularized it in the modern era of, okay, don't sell us last year's car. Just sell us as much as you can of this year's car.
And Haas was at one point a top 6 team doing exactly that. It worked.
But it worked. It worked best when Racing Point just straight up said, we take this silver car, we repaint it pink. Oh. It's the second best car on the grid at times.
Oh, yeah, funny that.
gentlemen, Sergio Perez. I've loved this man. I've loved watching this man for the last 12 years.
This weekend. He was fuck awful this weekend.
This was dreadful.
You know, it's crazy. He's going to get the second place finish that many people thought he should have deserved last year, and it'll be by far his worst season in top-tier equipment in the perception of many people.
As follow, we already talked a little bit on Red Bull's setup issues this weekend, but if you're going to expect one of the two drivers to adapt to it better, you would rightfully expect Max Verstappen to drag something out of it. And Perez just blew his last run in Q2, just spun the car on the curb to start the lap.
Very weird.
He basically did what Lance Stroll did, only in a far slower corner. And then dives Yuki, kills Yuki, damages his own front wing, works his way back through, is stuck basically for the whole first half of the race. He makes no progress into the points. And then Red Bull's strategy for the first safety car plays out. Perez holds off Alonso and company as long as he can, and then boxes. And that's the last we saw of him for a while. Right up until the point where he showed up in Alex Albon's onboard view, pile driving Alex Albon into a barrier.
Yeah, it was an incredibly clumsy move, and honestly, I'm stunned.
I didn't know this was Gran Turismo Sport Weekend.
I'm stunned Perez only got 5 seconds for that. That was a massively egregious collision.
Which meant nothing because he's in a Red Bull versus a Williams. Even a neutered Red Bull is still a billion times the car the Williams is. He just pulled a 5-second gap to everyone behind him, and it meant nothing.
Yeah, and then it cost Albon points. No question, he would have been in the points otherwise.
Amazing weekend. At Singapore, Williams was not only competitive, but was going to get decent points. And it was just wiped off the face of the earth for them.
Yeah, look, my general conclusion here is that 3-2 doesn't go at AlphaTauri. There is a viable argument for all 3 of the current drivers in this setup. Yuki Tsunoda, regardless of teammate, has, in my opinion, earned the right for a 4th year. I think he has objectively improved his racecraft, his overall speed, and he has dragged a terrible car into the points on multiple occasions. Liam Lawson has been even better than advertised. He has been excellent. He has come in on virtually no experience, raw, and driven like he's been here 5 years already. Can't ask for any more from what he's brought to that team in a very short time span. Daniel was like, okay, if you were going to get rid of Nick de Vries halfway through a season, you have to see out Daniel Ricciardo and see what he's got. Otherwise, this was all pointless. You have to see off what you've got with Ricciardo, and he's not had
You should have never even bothered bringing him back if it's just going to end like that.
Right, like don't get me wrong, the injury, it happens. You can't predict these things happening. It's a part of racing. But 2 weekends is not a big enough sample size to see what you've got with Ricciardo. And you had no problem as a team peddling the idea that Ricciardo was going all in for the Red Bull seat for 2025 when Perez's contract expires at the end of next season. So you had no problem peddling that narrative amongst the team when you brought him back after that Silverstone test. Right, so there is a credible argument here for all 3 of these dudes. But as I said in my DRR post about it, the cork in the bottle is not any of these 3 drivers. The cork in the bottle is Sergio Perez, in my opinion. I think if you're evaluating these 4 drivers based on this season right now, I have the most concerns about Sergio Perez. And I think it's hard to argue for any reasonable fan otherwise at this point. He is in, arguably, almost certainly, the best F1 car we have ever seen, and he has consistently underperformed expectations in that car. I'd say for at least half this season.
Let's say he's been at par, 6 or 7 of the races?
I don't know what's happened since Miami. Miami was going into the Miami weekend.
He got blown into the weeds from 9th place on the grid on the kind of race that Sergio Perez would typically excel in.
Right. That's when I knew the season was over. I was like, okay, Perez went into that round only 6 points back after Max's, rough start. Not his fault, but whatever. Perez took advantage of the situation, did what he had to do, won those races. Goes into Miami. Verstappen starts 9th on the grid, and he gets blown out. He was faster on 20-lap-old tyres compared to Checo at the crossover point. That was when I knew this season was over, because I was like, if Perez is doing that, then there's no way he's winning a championship with like this. And of course, as we all saw, Verstappen would go on to win that race pretty comfortably in the end. Now, since then, his season's gone to shit. For me, he is the definition. He is what people thought Sebastian Vettel was towards the end of his career. He's a Goldilocks driver. He's fine when the car is suited to him. The moment you take him out of his comfort zone, the pace drops off a cliff. If it rains, he's boned. If he's in any sort of spontaneous situation, he messed up in qualifying. He had to dig himself out of a hole 3 or 4 times this year already to get a decent result.
With how the race actually ended up playing out as far as Red Bull's race pace, if he doesn't blow Q2, there's a good chance he's their protagonist in the race. He actually got a golden opportunity, and he just threw it in the trash again.
I never would have thought I would have seen this happening, once he got that win in Sakir, after all those years of constantly performing above average in midfield, upper midfield cars.
He was one of the best floor guys in the entire field.
He was 4th in the championship at the end of 2020. 4th! In a racing point. 4th in this championship. That was an incredible season from Checo.
Kind of a racing point. But
yeah. No matter which, you're a big Perez guy, RJ. You tell me how you feel about this, because this you have to admit this is not good for Checo. This is concerning.
Yeah, I put it out there, since Miami, he's not been the same driver. I don't know if it's psychologically. I don't know if it's just the way the car has developed out of his favor. I know that a lot of this anguish is just because we're having much different discussions if Red Bull actually had to work for its drivers and constructors titles. I think the big thing
Max Verstappen is still the highest tier constructor on the grid by a large margin.
Dude, It's crazy. And for a lot of people, it's just well, if none of these other constructors are good enough, can we at least get a good intra-team battle for the championship and the driver standings? And we haven't been.
Well, and no one besides those people is asking Perez to go out and beat Max, because that's, at the moment, that is just an unrealistic expectation of person in the other car that Max Verstappen is driving. Right now, the problem is that there's weekends where he doesn't even make the top 5.
I don't want it to end like this, man.
At this point, this is the situation. Red Bull effectively has a freebie for the rest of this year. They had both titles won by the time we were halfway through Europe.
They had both titles won when they rolled that car off the truck in Bahrain.
Right. So they've had half a season post Nick de Vries to basically roll the dice and see who their second best driver in their ranks is. At this point, it's hard for me to argue it's Sergio Perez. I can't get there.
Don't think there is an argument. And by the way, that 5th place finish this weekend dropped Max's finish. Thank you,
Jason in the chat.
Dropped it to a 1.26.
Is that good?
We're not asking Perez to go beat the guy who's got an average finish of 1.26.
Right.
We're asking him to be at par.
Back him up.
I have a theory, right?
Go on.
Because, the feeling is, okay, if they go with Ricciardo and Tsunoda at whatever we're calling AlphaTauri next year, it's been floated around that, people are saying, oh, maybe they'll loan Liam Lawson out to Red Bull. What I'm saying is, you put Verstappen and Lawson in Red Bull. Mm-hmm. You put Ricciardo and Tsunoda at Team Faenza, Bulls Racing, AlphaTauri, Toro Rosso, whatever we're calling them. And you loan Checo out to Williams, which would be awkward after last weekend.
It might be hard feelings there. I think that is the worst possible thing you could do to Liam Lawson. I think you will send Liam Lawson careening out of Formula One if you put him up against Max after three. Did we not learn our lesson with Alex Albon?
You're feeding another lamb to the slaughter. For me, you're loaning out the wrong guy. You loan Lawson to Williams. Get him on the grid for next year. Yeah. He's surely a better option for what that team is right now than Logan Sargent.
But it's looking like Logan Sargent's going to keep his place on the grid with Williams anyway. Because
okay, I take back all my kind words about James Vowles because the man is unserious if he thinks Logan Sargent is at this level.
Yeah, they want to give him
a try. We were trying with Logan Sargent, but it's how many cars has he wiped out this year now?
Too many.
Way too goddamn many.
Like, for me, Red Bull's priority at this point should be get Liam Lawson on the grid by any means necessary. If you were prepared to loan out Albon to Williams a couple of years ago, there's no reason why you can't do it again with Liam Lawson.
And this team has some mobility.
Who clearly, Williams has got a better platform for success right now than AlphaTauri does. So why not just loan him to Williams? Williams has got a team of Albon and Lawson. It's a very strong midfield level team. You can cook with that lineup, and then you can keep Ricciardo and Tsunoda at AlphaTauri next year, whatever it's called, and you can have them fight it out for the Red Bull seat next year.
Hugo Boss Bulls Racing. What a
who says no?
Best name for a team. No, I like that. The other thing was just something I was thinking of because, they've really got 5 drivers and only 4 spots to go to fit them in.
Right. But we'll see how this works out. I mean, I'd be very sad if they cut Checo at the end of the season a year early because he's a very easy guy to root for overall, and he's a great feel-good story about the midfield who did finally come good and did finally get the opportunity that he deserved after years of plugging away at it. But Red Bull, if you're being strict at evaluating how they've been this year, the only reason we're not having even more pressurized conversations about Checo is because Red Bull has had no competition this season. And if anything, it's made Perez look worse by comparison.
You've got Max winning certain races by 30, 35 seconds. You've got Perez scrapping with Alpines at times.
Right. That's unacceptable. That's just not going to work in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, look, we've just had a productive conversation about how Sergio Perez is not meeting expectations without hitting below the belt.
If only some other people could manage that. Yeah. It's a great segue. RJ, hit him with it.
Yeah, so Dr. Helmut Marko, head honcho Red Bull Racing. Not the head honcho, but he's been there forever and ever. Helmut Marko
is an advisor of the actual the greater Red Bull brand.
Yeah,
beyond just the racing team.
So Dr. Marko was given an FIA code of ethics warning after coming out with very xenophobic comments regarding Sergio Perez. After Monza, Marko said, quote, "It was surely one of Checo Perez's best weekends, and we know about his problems in qualifying, which is where he has his doubts. Let's remember that he is South American, and so his head is not as focused as Max Verstappen or as Sebastian Vettel was. But racing is his forte, and he had a very good race. Red Bull Racing offered no public statement, but Marko has since apologized for his comments. Dre, let's talk about this one.
I'm going to be real with you. And this is me being completely honest, I wanted to write about this on WTF1. I was stopped from doing so because they feared that the words I was going to say would land a cease and desist on my door. So if you want to know how I really feel about it, think about how much I have to hold back in this conversation when I talk about this.
Well, we could say that this is not the first insane thing that Helmut Marko has said. This
isn't the first thing that he said this past month that's been completely off his rocker. I am convinced that when that rock took out his eye and ended his racing career, it took out a part of his frontal lobe as well.
This is the guy that suggested during the first wave of COVID that, like, to build up drivers' immunity, they should have a COVID camp. This is a guy who was making, like, really weird inferences between the temperament of Yuki Tsunoda and fellow Honda Jr. Ayumu Iwasa.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a new thing.
A quote-unquote typical Japanese.
Bro. And this is the guy who has a hand running Red Bull Junior team, like, a very, very ruthless junior program. On top of all this stuff.
It's incredibly frustrating that this happens again and again and again and again with Helmut Marko. And I think a big part of the problem with it is he has no one to answer to. Like, he is, as Cam quite rightly said, this is something I've told people this on social media for a long time. Helmut Marko is not a member of Red Bull Racing. He doesn't answer to anybody in Red Bull Racing's team. He is an overall advisor to Red Bull as a global brand. He is employed not by Red Bull Racing, but by Red Bull Global. He is on the board, and let's not forget, he had a very close relationship with Dietrich Mateschitz before he passed away last year. And the other ownership family that owns 51% of Red Bull are close with him. Apparently, Mintzlaff would get rid of him in a heartbeat, who's the new director of Red Bull's racing endeavors and their sporting side of things. But he would have to cross the other side of the ownership camp, and that's not happening.
That unfortunately is the problem, that as someone who's not even really a member of Formula One in the greater circus, he's just there. Yeah. There's even only so much the FIA can do.
Yeah, they gave him a warning on their code of ethics to basically watch his behavior. The sport issued no official statement, which I thought was disappointing because they did it for Nelson Piquet last year, and that was over a year-old interview. Why does this one not count?
And Red Bull themselves basically said nothing about it, other than Christian bringing up the previously mentioned point that he's not a member of Red Bull Racing. Well, he is a face of your brand. And that face of your brand is a cunt.
Right.
Yeah. I've said it before, like, back before Red Bull became what they are now, in between that lull period, and I was just like thinking, if Christian Horner and Helmut Marko were running any other team like Ferrari or Alpine, they would have been shown the door like weeks ago. But Red Bull isn't operated like that. Red Bull Racing is more operated like an oligarchy than a democracy.
Right.
In a matter of speaking, because, like, Christian Horner and Helmut Marko are the team.
Exactly. And like I said, Helmut answers to basically no one in that camp, and that is the problem. Like, again, I tell people, he is Red Bull's head of driver development, not Red Bull Racing, Red Bull's big brand. And unfortunately, like, again, here's what I will say. Red Bull needs to clean up its own house. Badly. Very badly. There is... I'm only stating facts, and I will legally say that this is only hearsay, but there is a list here with Red Bull-affiliated moments regarding racial and xenophobic comments that have been made in public. Yuri Vips. They sacked an employee in 2021 over racist messages that were exposed on the internet. Helmut Marko repeatedly has made xenophobic comments regarding his drivers. There is a pattern of behavior here. Like, once you could chalk it up to a bad apple. It can happen in any organization. It can happen anywhere, right? And look, every team has had people that have been guilty and liable of this. Mercedes themselves had to fire 4 of their employees in 2019 because they were anti-Muslim. Like, so people want to people want to turn it into a fan base war of, Red Bull are being racist. Well, if you want to go down that road, then other teams have been guilty of this too in their own backyard. Unfortunately, that's the unfortunate nature of businesses that hire hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Sport is a cross section of society. There is no getting around that. Red Bull needs to clean up its act. It needs to clean up its own backyard because this is happening far too often at this point. Like there needs to be like I don't envy anyone who works in their PR department. Like they've already probably ripped out most of their hairline by now out of sheer frustration because they can't go more than 6 months without some sort of disaster hitting the side of their department, like a torpedo hitting a boat. It's stupid. Look, I get it. Helmut Marko is not going to go anywhere until he retires or dies. He's 80 years old. He's in that ballpark, right? There's no one. He has no one to answer to. Christian Horner has to clean up his mess most of the time, and the FIA are a governing body. They can't go into Red Bulls and say, "Hey, sack this man." No, they can't do that.
Yeah, if anything, I was thinking
I would love to have him kicked out of the paddock.
Right. If anything, I would just think comparing it to what the Piquet thing is like. Nelson Piquet is not affiliated with anybody, so it's easier for us to wash our hands of him than it is for somebody who's constantly here all the time.
Make it so he's not there anymore.
Exactly.
The FIA can do that. And if Red Bull doesn't like it, they can pound sand.
Sure. There's not much anybody can do. If you want to ban him from the paddock to make yourself feel better, fine. People are still going to interview him.
Yep.
People are still going to talk to him. He's an important figure. Let's not forget.
People seek him out, Dre, because he is always worth a controversial soundbite.
That's why they talk to Bernie Ecclestone all the time.
Of course.
That's why Bernie Ecclestone just set in motion a legal case over the 2008 championship because he couldn't shut the fuck up.
Right. Like, all I'm saying is Bernie is very lucky a key evidence giver in that Massa case is now dead, and that's Max Mosley. Like, he's very, very lucky in that sense. Now, like I said, Helmut, like, people, like, you can ban him from the paddock if it makes you feel any better about it. It won't change a damn thing because, like, let's not forget, where did Helmut Marko make these comments? Oh, right, it was Service TV, the Red Bull-owned TV channel that Dietrich Mateschitz was putting far-right personalities on left, right, and centre. Like, he's been platformed by Red Bull's own network as the important figure he is.
He's on his own He's on his own platform, funded by the company that employs him.
Absolutely. So, yeah, he will say whatever the fuck he wants. And again, he has little, if not anyone, to answer to.
Yeah, I was about to say, would they have even bothered issuing an apology if this was still the old regime under old ownership?
I think, like I said, I think he has genuinely upset Red Bull to a degree because this is the first time he's actually apologized for his bullshit. Yeah. Like I said, I think Mintzlaff on the other sporting side of Red Bull does not like him, from what I've been told by reports inside the paddock. From
everything we know, he's not a big fan of them even being involved in Formula One.
Yeah, like, he's a football guy. And if you don't know European soccer, let me tell you for free, they look at the books very closely. A lot, like, Dietrich loved motorsport. He was always going to be the motorsport backer for Red Bull because when the financial crisis happened and everybody was pulling out of F1, he put more money back in. Like, he loved motorsport. That was his passion. Yeah. Mintzlaff is not that dude. He is a football guy first and foremost. He's got
the guy who's angry he didn't get funneled that money when he was running Red Bull's football operations.
Right. And he's now in charge of the big boy stuff. And let's not forget, what started this year was the biggest rumor to come out of testing, that AlphaTauri might get shut down or moved. AlphaTauri now has to justify its own existence. It's not just going to be Dietrich's vanity project anymore. It has to be worth running. Otherwise, they will shut it down.
This is a lot. This is a whole lot to take in. But, yeah, I didn't like what Helmut said. I have liked a lot of things.
He wouldn't. He wasn't even like correctly racist the first time. He said he's from South America, but then he had to correct himself and say, "Oh, actually, sorry, I meant that he's from Mexico." I was like, "No, actually, I meant to be this racist."
he thought that was clarifying the situation. Just to be clear, I meant Central America when I was being racist. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great job, Helmet.
Oh my god.
Glad you got that cleared up for us.
Yeah. No shit. None of us like what he said. None of us like any of this.
Remember when this sport claimed it was racing as one?
You're funny.
It's amazing how quickly that campaign died the moment 2020 season ended, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, anything to sell more t-shirts.
Yeah, we sold some posters, we sold some t-shirts, we hired a couple of presenters of colour, and we thought, job done, everybody. Let's move on.
We beat racism.
Etc. Here we are. Yeah, like you don't need us, 3 grown adults, 2 of us in our 30s, one of us to tell you that Helmut Marko is a racist piece of shit. But I'm going to tell you one more time, Helmut Marko is a racist piece of shit.
Overwhelmingly.
And he shouldn't be anywhere near Formula One, but unfortunately he will be because he's one of the most powerful people in the entire company. Isn't that fucking wonderful?
I love Jason putting this in the chat. He's one step away from saying he's not racist because he has a color TV. 10 points to Jason.
10 points to Gryffindor. Fuck J.K. Rowling too. Also, before I go, I want to get this off my chest as well. At Sky Sports in the UK, please do me a favour. Cut Danica Patrick's contract today.
Yesterday.
Please.
With all due respect for Danica Patrick's accomplishments, she is not good for her brand.
Due respect? Due respect. Okay.
All right. I'm trying to be nice about this, right? But this guy, you cannot have a sustainability campaign plastered all over your sports broadcasts while also hiring a climate change denier on her public feed. You look like idiots.
Who just went out here on her social media to use the death of Martin Truex Jr.'s ex-wife, Sherry Palmetz, after a years-long battle with ovarian cancer over this past weekend, to basically tear into Martin Truex Jr. on Instagram.
Yeah, as if he needs that right now. As if he needs that bullshit right now in his life.
Yeah, I didn't even
Sherry
want to.
fought for a long fucking time.
Yeah, I know for a fact that ovarian cancer is often a matter of when rather than if, which is horrible enough as it is. And I wasn't even going to mention that because my argument was more to do with Sky and this broadcast. But I did see Danica Patrick's comments about that situation on her Instagram. All I will say is it comes off as bitter, it comes off as classless, and you've taken the death of someone who was campaigned incredibly hard to try and raise awareness and funding for a very rare, very difficult form of cancer to beat, and you've made it about you. It's a disgusting thing to do. Grow up. You're a grown-ass woman in your 40s. You should know better. You are exactly the sort of person that should be fighting for Shelley, and instead, you've made it about you because you don't like Truex for whatever fucking personal reason that may be. Classless. Absolutely classless. Grow up. Honestly. I just can't get over we joked about the pettiness of the record books last week on this show with Toto Wolff. This takes it to a whole nother level.
It's being petty over a literal matter of life and death.
Don't take someone's death as a reason to take shots at somebody else who is grieving right now. Jesus Christ. Honestly. Right. Formula One is back for the Japanese Grand Prix this weekend.
Expect normal service to resume emphatically.
Probably. Red Bull has a very good chance of winning the Constructors' Championship this weekend. Break out the T-shirts. It's happening again. Max can't win it this weekend, but he can win it in Qatar in 3 weeks' time, potentially. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But yeah, Japanese Grand Prix. I do love Japan. It's one of my favorite tracks on the calendar. Please have a half-decent race. I do love Japan.
Good news. It's only going to be warm. At worst, it's going to be mostly cloudy throughout the weekend.
Oh, good. So it's going to be extremely processional, but thank God it's not going to rain.
Thank God it's not. Thank God I haven't got a typhoon in the area. Generally speaking, I would consider that to be good news.
Hey, Drake, when are we going MotoGP racing?
We probably aren't.
Apparently, there's the Indian Grand Prix this weekend. But if you've been keeping up with that story, if you haven't, I'll give you a quick heads up. India's visa department has been dreadful, and they are now trying to rush through as many visa applications as possible to get the paddock out to that Grand Prix in time for the race weekend that starts on Friday. Oh, and by the way, the track still isn't homologated yet.
Dude, they're doing a Papers, Please speed run right now.
Yeah, Marc Marquez was riding a bicycle a few hours ago because he didn't get his visa.
Yeah,
Brad Binder doesn't have his visa.
Right. So they're trying to sort all of that shit out right now. They have to get as much of the paddock out there as possible. And I don't think you'll mind me saying this. Our friend and yours, Lewis Sotheby, still can't get out there right now because he missed his flight because he didn't have his visa. As his journos, like Simon Patterson got his today as we're recording this on Tuesday the 19th. On the way to his flight. His wife Maddie isn't going to make it in time, so she's had to stay at home, which sucks because she's also works in the paddock as well. So we don't know if we're going to get a Grand Prix this weekend.
Those operational issues with Dorna that we've been talking about basically for 2 seasons now.
Yeah,
feels a lot more real now, huh?
It's happened again. And we don't even know. Like, by the way, there's a riders only meeting on Thursday regarding the safety of this track.
There's a higher than 0% chance. Sorry to cut you, RJ. There's a much higher than 0% chance that we have a rider walkout this weekend. I shit you not.
So, Dre, if that happens, we don't have a race to talk about next week.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do with our time this week?
Well, how about we sit down, crunch some numbers, and review IndyCar for next year?
All right.
Sounds like fun.
I think we can review it right now. Alex Palou, good. Scott Dixon, still good. Joseph Newgarden, I don't know anymore.
It's weird. It's a weird, complicated IndyCar season. Like I said, if you've kept up with my season review and my personal thoughts and everything, there's some weird shit that went down in IndyCar this year. We'll try and make as much sense of it as possible next week because, things might be a little bit late next week because I'm going to Las Vegas on Friday. As you do. So I'll be out there for that one doing the WTF1 wrap live. Live from Las Vegas, which is a weird place to be, but here we are. As sort of the king in our chat says, Viva Las Vegas. Yes, that is a thing. So thanks to my new best friends at MoneyGram for flying my obnoxious ass out to Vegas for a weekend. That'll be fun. So if you're in Vegas this past weekend, come down to the MoneyGram watch party for the Japanese Grand Prix on Saturday night. A certain someone will be there. Say hi. But until then, I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Cam Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Thank you very much for listening in, and we'll catch you next week for maybe an Indian Grand Prix in MotoGP, probably a Japanese Grand Prix in Formula One, and maybe an IndyCar season review as well. Till then, sayonara.
Later, y'all.
I don't know how to follow that up.
The one time Cam hasn't got an outro for us. God,
that's the outro, I guess.
That's what not winning feels like, I suppose.
What are you talking about? Finish 1-2 in Indianapolis.